Hey everyone, welcome to your very own deep dive. And today we're taking a look at Estée Lauder.
Estée Lauder.
I know. You probably recognize that classic blue bottle.
Yeah.
But today we're going way deeper than just the surface.
Deeper.
You actually sent over a really interesting article from the Motley Fool asking, is Estée Lauder stock a buy, a sell, or a hold in 2025?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a timely question too, because this beauty giant has seen its stock fall almost 80% from its peak during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a pretty dramatic drop.
Yeah.
To get a handle on what's happening, I think it helps to remember that Estée Lauder, the company, has been around for almost 80 years.
Wow, almost 80 years. So they've seen a lot of ups and downs in the market.
They've definitely weathered their fair share of storms.
And I know the article mentions they launched this profit recovery and growth plan last year.
They did. It's an ambitious plan aiming to significantly improve profit margins by the end of 2026.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What exactly does that plan involve?
Well, it's a two-pronged approach, really, focusing on both boosting gross margins and implementing some pretty serious cost reductions.
Okay, so two sides to the same coin. Could you give us some specific examples of what those strategies look like in practice?
Sure. On the gross margin side, they're probably exploring things like optimizing their pricing strategies, maybe introducing more premium product lines, or even selectively raising prices in specific markets.
So making sure they're getting the most out of each product.
Exactly. And they might also be focusing on negotiating better deals with their suppliers, to reduce the cost of raw materials and packaging.
Interesting. So squeezing those margins from both ends.
Exactly.
And what about the cost reduction side of things? Where are they looking to maybe trim the fat, so to speak?
Well, this could involve a whole range of things like streamlining their operations, maybe consolidating manufacturing facilities, or optimizing their supply chain logistics.
So finding efficiencies wherever they can.
Right. And they might also look at reducing administrative expenses, or you're really reevaluating their marketing spend to make sure they're getting the most bang for their buck.
So really scrutinizing every dollar spent.
Precisely. It sounds like a lot.
It does sound like a lot. It sounds like they're pulling out all the stops to get back on track.
They are. And the article suggests that it's starting to show in their financials. Their gross margins are improving, and their adjusted earnings per share are up.
That's encouraging to hear. But the article also mentions a dividend reduction. What's the significance of that?
That's an interesting point. While it might disappoint some investors in the short term, it actually signals a commitment to reinvesting in the business and fueling this turnaround effort.
Okay, so they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially. It suggests that they're, battening down the hatches and really prioritizing long-term growth over immediate shareholder payouts.
So it's like a bit of a trade-off. Short-term pain for potential long-term gain.
Right. It's like a calculated risk.
So overall, kind of a mixed bag. Some positive signs, but also a hint that the road to recovery might be longer and bumpier than initially anticipated.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment.
Okay, so now we get to the heart of the article's question. Is Estée Lauder a buy, a sell, or a hold?
It really lays out a compelling case for each stance.
It does. What stood out to you as the strongest arguments for each side?
Well, the buy argument hinges on the potential of this turnaround plan that we've been talking about.
Right, their big bet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It also relies on the enduring power of the Estée Lauder brand and the fact that the stock is currently trading at a significant discount compared to its peak.
So it's like a classic value investors play, betting on a comeback story.
You got it.
I like it. What about the sell side? What are their main concerns?
They argue that the Chinese market might not rebound as strongly as some hope, and they point to the rise of new competitors like e.l.f. Beauty, who seem to be capturing market share, especially among millennials.
Interesting. So a combination of economic uncertainty and intensifying competition. That makes sense. And then there's the hold perspective, which I imagine sits somewhere in between.
It does. It acknowledges the uncertainty surrounding the turnaround plan's ultimate success, the unpredictable situation in China and the complexities of the global economic landscape.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts. It's essentially saying, let's wait and see how things shake out.
A cautious approach.
A cautious approach, for sure. It's understandable given all the unknowns.
Absolutely. And we have to remember, Estée Lauder isn't just one brand. They have a whole portfolio of names like Clinique, Aveda, MC, just to name a few.
Yeah, a diverse portfolio for sure.
And then there's the long-term demand for luxury beauty products, which could definitely rebound as inflation cools and consumer spending picks back up.
You're bringing up a great point. The diversity of their brand portfolio could be a real strength for them in weathering these turbulent times.
Right. Different brands appeal to different segments of the market. Some might be more resilient to economic downturns than others. But the article did mention that department stores, which are traditionally a stronghold for beauty brands, are struggling. So is that a major concern for Estée Lauder?
It's definitely a factor they need to address.
Hmm.
Department stores are facing their own set of challenges, like declining foot traffic and the rise of e-commerce. It's a whole different landscape.
So how is Estée Lauder adapting to this changing retail landscape? Are they diversifying their distribution channels?
They are. They've been investing heavily in their online presence, creating personalized e-commerce experiences, and engaging with consumers through social media.
It's like they're trying to meet the customer wherever they are.
Exactly. And they're also expanding their presence in specialty beauty stores like Sephora, which tend to attract a younger and more diverse clientele.
It's about having a multi-pronged approach, maintaining a presence in department stores while establishing themselves in these newer, faster-growing channels.
You got it. It's about being adaptable and responsive to the evolving ways people shop for beauty products these days.
And speaking of evolving, let's talk about that millennial factor. The article mentioned that millennials seem to be gravitating towards other brands. Why do you think that is?
It's a complex issue, but I think it comes down to a few key things. Millennials are really discerning consumers, often prioritizing brands that align with their values. They're looking for authenticity, transparency, and a commitment to social and environmental responsibility.
So it's not just about the product itself, it's about what the brand stands for.
Precisely. And millennials are digital natives, comfortable with technology, quick to embrace new trends. They're also highly influenced by social media and online communities.
So Estée Lauder needs to not only modernize its image, but also demonstrate a genuine commitment to these values that are important to younger consumers.
You hit the nail on the head. And they are taking steps in that direction, with initiatives focused on sustainability, ethical sourcing, and diversity and inclusion. But they need to communicate these efforts effectively to resonate with millennials who are becoming increasingly discerning about the brands they support.
So it's a balancing act.
Absolutely.
So we've got this really fascinating mix of challenges and opportunities for Estée Lauder. They're a legacy brand with a rich history, but they're facing intense competition, evolving consumer preferences, and a rapidly changing retail landscape.
It's a classic tale of a company at a crossroads.
Can they leverage their heritage while embracing innovation and adapting to the demands of a new generation of beauty consumers?
That's the big question. And it's a question with significant financial implications, especially for investors who are considering whether to buy, sell, or hold their stock.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll be diving into next as we explore the potential risks and rewards of investing in Estée Lauder at this pivotal moment. So we were just talking about department stores and how they've been like the traditional home for beauty brands.
Yeah, the go-to spot.
Yeah, but now they're facing their own set of challenges. But how's Estée Lauder dealing with that shift, especially with their strong ties to department stores?
Well, they're not about to ditch department stores completely, but they do recognize they need to diversify.
Makes sense.
And we've already touched on their push into e-commerce and those specialty beauty stores like Sephora.
Right.
That strategy really helps them connect with a younger, more online-focused customer base.
Yeah, for sure. Now, something else that stood out in that Motley Fool article was Estée Lauder's struggles in China.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
What's going on there? It's a massive market for them, right?
Huge. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The article points to China's economic slowdown as one factor.
Right. Naturally, that's going to affect spending in general.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not quite that simple. We're also seeing the rise of some really strong domestic beauty brands in China.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and those homegrown brands are really resonating with Chinese consumers.
So it's not just the overall economy, it's also this increased competition within China itself.
Exactly. And then, of course, we can't forget about the geopolitical landscape, which always adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah, trade tensions, currency fluctuations, all that fun stuff.
All those things can really impact multinational companies like Estée Lauder.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
I like that analogy. It's a good one. Their turnaround plan really needs to be adaptable to all these moving pieces.
It definitely does. And speaking of adapting, let's circle back to those millennials we were talking about.
Millennials?
The article mentioned they're gravitating towards other brands. What do you think those brands are doing that's clicking with them?
Well, I think it's about authenticity and transparency.
Right.
Younger consumers especially want more than just a product. They want to connect with a brand's values and mission.
They want to feel good about the brands they support.
Exactly.
It's interesting to think about how that impacts a company like Estée Lauder.
Yeah, with such a long history and legacy.
Right. They built their reputation on this idea of prestige and exclusivity. But that might not resonate as strongly with millennials who are looking for a more down-to-earth brand experience.
You've hit the nail on the head there. And it's not just about the image. Millennials are also very socially conscious. They want to support companies that are committed to sustainability, ethical sourcing, and inclusivity.
And the article did mention that Estée Lauder is making some moves in those areas.
They are.
What have they been doing, and is it resonating with younger consumers?
Well, they've implemented several initiatives around sustainability, ethical sourcing, and diversity and inclusion.
Okay, good.
For example, they've set some pretty ambitious goals to reduce their environmental footprint, improve their packaging practices, and source ingredients responsibly. They've also been working to promote diversity within their own workforce and leadership.
So they're taking concrete steps.
They are. But as we talked about earlier, it's not enough to just implement these initiatives. They have to communicate these efforts effectively and authentically.
So it's this delicate balancing act between upholding their legacy and evolving to meet the expectations of a new generation.
Exactly. And that balance extends to their financial performance as well.
Yeah, we talked about their stock price taking a hit and their efforts to boost profit margins. But what do you think the future holds for investors in Estée Lauder?
Tough question.
It is. The Motley Fool article presented the buy, sell, or hold dilemma. But I'm curious to get your take. What are some key factors investors should be watching closely?
Well, the success of their turnaround plan is crucial. If they can actually deliver on those cost-cutting measures and boost their gross margins, it would be a very positive sign.
And what about the China factor?
China.
We talked about the challenges they're facing there. Just how important is that market to their overall success?
Well, China is a huge market for luxury goods, and Estée Lauder has invested a lot there. Their performance in China is definitely going to play a significant role in determining their overall success.
So investors need to keep an eye on both internal factors like the turnaround plan and external factors like the Chinese market and global economic trends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about those ever-changing consumer preferences. Their ability to connect with younger consumers, especially millennials and Gen Z, is going to be critical for their long-term growth.
Okay. So we've explored the challenges, the strategies, the factors that could influence Estée Lauder's future. Now let's shift gears and delve a bit deeper into the financial side of things. What does all this mean for investors?
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground.
A lot to digest.
Yeah, from Estée Lauder's ambitious turnaround plan to all the shifting trends in the beauty industry.
It's a dynamic landscape for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
But let's get back to that central question from the Motley Fool article. Is Estée Lauder stock a buy, sell, or hold at this point?
The million-dollar question.
Right. And as we've discussed, there's some really solid arguments on each side.
Definitely.
But the article seemed to land in the hold camp, recommending investors hold on to their stock for now. What are your thoughts on that?
Given everything we've talked about, I think that's a pretty reasonable take.
There's just a lot of uncertainty around Estée Lauder right now. The success of their turnaround plan is still up in the air. The Chinese market is unpredictable. And the global economic outlook, well, let's just say it's not exactly sunny.
Right, so a lot of unknowns.
A lot of unknowns. So a wait-and-see approach seems like the most sensible option for investors at this point.
Yeah, it makes sense to kind of monitor the situation before making any big moves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on how their turnaround efforts are progressing. Watch those external factors we discussed, like the Chinese market and the global economy, and see how consumer preferences continue to evolve.
And speaking of those turnaround efforts,
Yeah.
what are the financial implications of all this? The article mentioned improvements in their gross margins and earnings per share growth, but also that dividend reduction. What does that tell us?
It's definitely a mixed bag. Those positive signs on the margin and earnings front suggest their cost cutting and those strategic initiatives are starting to pay off. But that dividend cut, it signals that they're not out of the woods yet and need to prioritize reinvesting in the business over those immediate payouts to shareholders.
So it's like a balancing act. They need to show progress to investors, but also make sure they have the resources to fuel their growth and, adapt to all these changing market conditions.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that the dividend cut, while it might be a bummer for some investors,
Right.
it could also be seen as a sign of prudence,
Yeah.
a long-term focus. They're in it for the long haul.
Okay, so it's all about perspective. What might seem negative to some could actually be a positive indicator of their commitment to growth and sustainability.
Precisely. And that long-term perspective is so important when you're thinking about any investment.
Hmm.
Short-term ups and downs are inevitable, but it's the company's overall trajectory, their ability to innovate and adapt, and their management's vision that really matters.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what key takeaways would you leave our listener with about Estée Lauder?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, Estée Lauder's at a crossroads. They have this amazing legacy and rich history, but they're facing some serious challenges.
Definitely.
Their ability to adapt and evolve is going to determine their future success.
It's like a classic story of a company navigating disruption, but it's also a chance to see how a well-established brand can reinvent itself for a new era.
Absolutely. And secondly, I'd emphasize the importance of informed decision-making. Whether you're an investor thinking about buying, selling, or holding Estée Lauder stock, or just a consumer interested in the beauty industry, staying informed is key.
We've given you a framework for understanding Estée Lauder's situation and what the future might hold, but ultimately the decision of what to do with that information is up to you, the listener.
You got it. And that's what's so great about these deep dives. They're a starting point for you to explore further, do your own research, and form your own conclusions.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for our deep dive into Estée Lauder. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the world of business and finance is constantly changing, so staying curious, informed, and engaged is the best way to navigate it all and make smart decisions.